Welcome back to Lenny Delight Chess. Today we're recapping round 3 of the MCC Classic. In this round I was playing with the black pieces against a 1576 rated opponent who opened the game with e4. Here we play c5, the Sicilian. They develop naturally with knight f3. We play knight c6, and again there are many different lines here. In round 1 we faced the Rossolimo with bishop b5. There's also ideas of the Alpen with a3 and then d4. Or like we got in this game here, we have the immediate d4, the open Sicilian. Here we take in the center, c takes d4, and knight takes back on d4. And now we play g6, initiating the accelerated dragon. This has ideas of fianchettoing the dark squared bishop along the long dark squared diagonal. Here, opponent plays the move c4. This is one of two moves that are often played against this accelerated dragon and dragon setups. One other idea that is often played is knight c3, and opponent here decides c4, the Maroczy bind. This clamps down on the d5 square. The e4 and c4 pawns both protect this crucial d5 square, which is going to control the position well for white, and black has to fight against for quite some time in the game. So here we continue with our natural development, bishop to g7, and opponent here plays bishop e3 to protect the knight that was under attack twice with only one defender. So defended twice, and also finds a logical home for the dark squared bishop for white. Here I played d6. This was to try and stop any ideas of pushes on the e file. In round 1, opponent was able to play e5 and then e6, putting a lot of pressure on our position. So d6 is trying to control any of those pushes in particular. Opponent continues with natural development, knight c3, both still in book here. And I played knight f6, still logical development, getting ready to castle. Here opponent plays f3. This is still in book. This is often happens in these dragon positions. It can happen with the pawn sitting back on c2, and often white will then castle long behind these pawns. Here, less likely to castle long, as opponent has already pushed c4, making a slightly weaker queen side. But again, these ideas of the pawn chain reinforces towards the important d5 square. Here we continue with book. We play castle, getting the king out of the center. Opponent plays bishop e2, finding a logical home for the light squared bishop. And here the first deviation was playing queen b6. Ideas here are to try and put pressure towards the center and put pressure towards the b2 pawn. Computer here wants the first knight maneuver, stepping the knight onto h5, opening up the dark squared bishop, and potentially finding a home for the knight back towards the center in future. But here again, I thought logical development, trying to put pressure onto the center and onto the b2 pawn. With pressure developing, opponent decides to take. Here we would have loved ideas like getting and taking on e4 if we were allowed to. So if opponent had just lazily castled here, we could have played the really nice move knight takes, although the computer doesn't bless it. The computer wants all the way with the knight g4, but still ideas of being able to take in the center. Here we can take with the bishop, take with the knight, and after we take and take and take, we get the knight towards the center, and we'd be doing quite well. None of that happened though. Opponent decides to take to alleviate that pressure. Here, the first move calculated is the queen takes. Simple recapture, gets the queen out of the way of danger from the bishop, as it currently sits on pre. That was the first move calculated. I also took a quick look at queen takes bishop. Here though, we need to calculate that white is going to take on e7 with a very nasty check. Winning this pawn, we then would have to sidestep, and then white can either get out by taking our bishop, which we'd have to recapture with the rook, or could even step back to the d5 square. Didn't particularly like that. It's a very similar tactic to what happened in round one, where I lost 2 crucial pawns to knight hops, so I wasn't so keen on that. The other calculation quickly was queen takes on b2, same check, winning this pawn, and after we sidestep the king, now this knight that is hanging is able to jump into d5, reinforcing this pawn, so we wouldn't be able to capture with the queen, so still not a good scenario there, so we simply just recapture with the queen. Here, opponent plays queen d2, both opening up so they can castle both directions, but also creating this battery. Very annoying battery that happens in these dragon positions, also happens in King's Indian and other scenarios where the black has fianchetted the dark squared bishop. Opponent can simply try and dig out the bishop here if it takes, queen takes, and here we would have to just allow the opponent to take our bishop and we take back with the king. King doesn't particularly like to stand on g7, although it's safe at this point, but we've lost our dragon bishop, which is very annoying, trying to play accelerated dragon. Not much we can do about that though, so here I try and continue with my own logical development, bringing the bishop out, the light squared bishop onto e6, trying to put pressure onto the c4 pawn, as well as trying to put more pressure onto d5 to fight against this bind. Here, opponent plays knight d5, cutting off the bishop from seeing the c4 pawn and starting to put some pressure here onto our knight. Here, we don't have knight takes. Knight takes, pawn takes, and we get forked by that pawn. So bishop takes is definitely a possibility. That was one idea, and we have to be careful that the knight on d5 has pressure against the hanging e7 pawn. Have to calculate though after the bishop takes and the pawn takes, white is going to have logical development, bringing the rook to the c file. So it's definitely something we have to be careful of. We have to also be careful that in future, perhaps recapturing will have a discovery against our queen. With that all in mind, I decided on rook f e8 to defend the hanging e7 pawn. Computer saying just get the queen out of the way straight away. Was a move I was calculating. I was also looking at queen coming back to c8, but thought this was not a terrible spot for the rook, and the queen can continue to put pressure from c6. Here opponent castles, logical move, and here I brought the bishop backwards to d7 with the idea of pushing e6 to put pressure onto this knight. Opponent here plays rook a c1, fighting for the c file, putting pressure on our queen, who now is being x-rayed by this rook, so we have to be careful with calculations here as well. Here I played e6, again trying to follow up with the plan of putting pressure onto the d5 knight, although computer doesn't bless this move. Computer wants b6 instead. This is because opponent has this b3 push which stops pressure in a few moves time against the dark squared bishop. Opponent doesn't see that either though, and alleviates the pressure straight away, resolving the tension by taking knight takes f6. This is a check, so we're forced in this move anyway, but it's a logical move anyway. The recapture with the dark squared bishop. Bishop takes f6. Again, now we have pressure against the b2 pawn, which is strategically going to help us to fight against our weak d6 pawn. Here opponent plays rook f d1, bringing the rook to try and double up against this d6 pawn, which is going to be weak against this battery. Here we are unable to bring our a rook as it defends the a7 pawn. So only real move tactically to try and put pressure against this weakness was rook e d1, both simultaneously defending the bishop, which would be hanging potentially after a queen trade against the rook, but also reinforcing these ideas of bishop takes. So here, if queen takes, we could either take straight away or take with the queen. So queen takes on d6, queen takes on d6, rook takes, and then we could play bishop takes, or in the different move order, queen takes, bishop takes straight away. If queen takes, we can even take with the bishop, and the rooks defend each other against this incoming rook as well. Opponent does see all those tactical complications as well and plays b3, trying to take away the pressure from our dark squared bishop. Here I played bishop c8. I looked at both these retreating moves, e8 and c8. Found it hard to decide which was the more logical route, but I thought in future I'm going to play b6 and then put the bishop onto b7 and fianchetto this direction on the light squares. Again, the computer wants the rooks to stay in contact, so bishop e8 is the computer choice. Here opponent starts to want to put pressure, so they play g4, trying to get the pawn storm happening on the king side. Computer wants play on the queen side, but this did feel like it was starting to try and put pressure against my king side, although I thought I had ideas to maybe play against the weak backward f3 pawn at some point in the future, if possible. So here I just continue with my logical development, b6. Here opponent plays bishop g5, which is a scary prospect. Obviously, if we take, the queen is just going to take and then going to continue with pressure supported by these pawns. But we have a great move here. We have the ability to also give this check on c5 with the queen. Computer again is blessing taking and allowing the queen to come in, but I thought this was less scary for me, giving this check initially, which only has one move in response. Opponent has to bring this bishop back, otherwise it's going to be hanging. Any other move, king sidestep, or even blocking with the queen is going to be met with bishop takes. Here I brought the queen back. Again, wanted to reinforce all my pieces and find a safe square for the queen. Computer wants a3 for the queen, which is also a scary prospect. Another possibility may have been to bring the bishop now against this battery, but unfortunately it doesn't quite work out tactically, because even after take and take, white's going to be better off here because they take, and we have to be careful which pawn we take with here, as this rook is hanging at the end of that line. So here, white continues with natural development. Computer evaluating this as a very bad position for black. Practically, it doesn't feel terrible, but both our bishops are very bad against all these light squared pawns. But computer thinks with these doubled rooks and a king that's going to become more active more quickly, that white is better in this position. Didn't go for these complications again, just brought the queen back. Here, opponents started to bring their king towards the center. And here I brought my queen to reinforce my bishop. I'm thinking about ideas about maybe bringing the bishop out in future and trying to get the queen to a safer square out of the way of any discovery if this pawn gets out of the way of the rook. Computer saying bring the bishop, which we're going to do momentarily. Here opponent plays g5, attacking our bishop, defended twice. So possible ideas of retreating moves, but I also thought initially about trying to bait my opponent into pushing another pawn, which may weaken the e4 pawn against my bishop, light squared bishop that's going to come to b7. So I did play that bishop e5, which is actually the best move. So good find here. Opponent does play the f4 push and now drops back to g7. It's natural square. Computer saying all the way back, but I thought g7 was a very natural square for this bishop. Here opponent plays bishop f3, trying to put pressure back along this light square diagonal and inadvertently against the rook. So if any of this pawn push comes, the rook is going to be hanging. So here with haste, we bring the light squared bishop onto this diagonal to try and fight back against the potential push from e5 and these bishops coming into contact and protecting the rook inadvertently, whilst also connecting these rooks, which is very important as well. Here opponent played queen b4, and for the first time in this game I've equalized, which is awesome to see post-game. I did feel like my position was fairly strong here. I wasn't quite sure. Perhaps I thought white was still doing better with more space, bishops that are slightly more active, and rooks that have very easy play along the d file. But computer likes black's position here, which is very interesting. Here I played rook d7 with ideas of doubling these rooks. Computer wants to fight back against these pawns straight away. It was a move I was calculating. I was looking at both f6 and h6, but I thought perhaps this was slightly early. That probably should be getting my rooks into place and play against these pawns in the future. Here opponent played rook d3, both getting ready to double the rooks, but also just reinforcing the dark squared bishop. Here I played rook a d8. Here, this obviously doubles the rooks and gets ready to fight for the d file. But computer wanted me to be brave here and already start to push e5. These ideas of playing this against the f4 pawn. White then continues, and we can continue to bring our rooks and just leave the tension here. Here, white isn't able to capture as we capture back with the queen, and we've got pressure along around the king. Plus, we've reopened our dark squared bishop. None of that happened though. Obviously, we doubled these rooks and tried to play along the d file. Opponent here doubles their rooks, seems logical, but opponent, the computer wants the opponent to start also pushing to put pressure, having this discovery and putting pressure onto this quite weak d6 pawn. Here, seeing ghosts, I brought the bishop back to try and reinforce the d6 pawn, which I thought was weak, considering that this pawn push was coming. There was the two rooks and the queen all barreling down onto this weak d6 pawn. but computer deeming it completely unnecessary, and that I really had to be brave here and push e5 myself. To again try and put pressure back against these pawns. Again, after bishop f8, opponent now brings back their queen to try and triple up. Computer deems this unnecessary, that really the dark square bishop can now take over this entire file, entire diagonal, and there was no need to triple stack, but seems logical to want to fight against the d6 pawn, although tactically having the queen in between the two rooks doesn't mean that you can take, because after take with the rook, if queen takes, obviously we take with the rook, not with the queen. Here I was getting lower on time, but we're still not necessarily feeling brave enough to push e5. So bring the bishop to try and reinforce the rooks. Computer again just wants us to reactivate the bishop, who stands not doing anything at this point. Opponent plays king g3, getting the king more activated. And here I shuffled. Not really sure, not really feeling confident about this e5 push, although it's the way to go. Potentially, again, reactivating the bishop would have even been better. But again, starting to feel the pressure of the clock now. Just started to shuffle these bishops now. Here opponent played h4, wanting to really start to ramp up the pressure against me, bringing all these pawns, getting the battery, and all this starting to barrel down on the king side. Here I thought I had to do something, especially with the clock pressure, and unfortunately found the wrong pawn push. Again, the computer this whole time has been calling for e5, although I thought there was a similar idea about trying to play against these pawns, but f5 wasn't the right idea. Opposite doesn't necessarily work, but the e pawn can just take straight away, which opponent does. Now these bishops are in contact, and definitely got too fancy with this, taking with the bishop, missing white's in between move, thinking that now the king will take back and then I'll take the pawn. But there was absolutely no need for this. I could have just simply taken, white would have taken, and then I would have taken with the rook. And although this pawn is weak, it's still defended plenty by my pieces. So again, saw this ghost, and unfortunately took with the bishop. Now, white has this incredible in-between move, f6, attacking my queen, and really now just clamping down with these pawns. White here is completely winning. Here I have to retreat with queen e8. Then white goes ahead and takes black's bishop with king takes on f3. Here I was entirely too late with e5. Needed to come a good 5 moves ago. Now opponent just take it the queen, but this is a lost position for black. Played on a few more moves just to try and get the experience, but yeah, this is already a resignable position. White stops the last potential trick of trying to give a check and winning at least the h4 pawn back, but this is all over here. Queen f5, rook comes in, have to retreat. The other rook comes in, we retreat, and in this position, I resign the game as there's nothing more to be done here. Completely clamped out against these pawns. The opponent is completely already taking over the e-file. These rooks are standing grim against all the pressure, and there's just nothing to be done here. So it's where I resigned the game with only a few minutes left on my clock after 90 minutes of play. Some important takeaways here. Played a lot of really good moves, even up to move 29 and or 27 or so, and was ready to equalise. So really this retreat was one too many. Really it was here, had to be brave and really try and start taking over the game. Had to acknowledge that I had a good position and it was time to start expanding, that I had pushed against my opponent's initiative and defended well and equalised, and that it was my turn to start to take over. And yeah, just unfortunately didn't see this pawn push, but I'm going to keep working on it and hope that from this game we can acknowledge that we have the ability to defend and hold on to these positions, these complicated Sicilian positions, which are scary because they lose space early, but they're holdable, especially against this Maroczy bind, which is quite an annoying system, but good to know that I can fight back against it and get to an equal position. And then I've just got to try and acknowledge my position being a positive one, and when it's time to start my own initiative, especially when it's just these small pawn pushes. They're hard to see, but yeah, definitely need to start looking for these in my future games as well. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. Appreciate your support, and thank you so much for tuning in to Lanny Diet Chess for round 3 of the MCC Classic. Hope to look forward to seeing you in round 4 next week. Thank you.